Hello and welcome to episode 112. While last week was a lengthy special, this week is a shorter instalment focusing on just one science fiction novel. The Fall of Chronopolis was published in 1974 and is one of the breezy entertainments written by Barrington J. Bayley, a close friend and collaborator of the better-known Michael Moorcock. Featuring battles between time ships in the temporal substratum, a sinister cult, and a machine with the collective intelligence of several dead emperors, this is classic 70s SF pulp. It's also what critic Rhys Hughes once called, perhaps the ultimate, time travel story. If you read this novel or have other thoughts about Barrington J. Bayley, I'd love to read any comments you might post on the article at andyjohnson.xyz. Also, if you'd like to catch up with my previous Bayley review of 1976's The Garments of Caean, listen back to episode 108. Barrington J. Bayley spent much of the 1970s writing space opera science fiction which blended the excitement of the pulp era with the experimentalism of the new wave. Originally published in 1974, The Fall of Chronopolis is something different. It preserves the formidable ships, baroque plotting and fundamental strangeness of something like The Garments of Caean, but here, as the title implies, Bayley's vessels travel not in space, but rather in time. In this setting, humans have not mastered spaceflight. Instead of dominating the stars, they've sought to extend their control over time. The Chronotic Empire, ruled over by the Caean dynasty, controls a swathe of hundreds of years of history. Its powerful time fleets are made up of time-travelling vessels which seek to head off any threats from other points in time. However, in the Fall of Chronopolis, the Empire faces twin dangers both from within and from without, which threaten to bring the whole edifice crashing down. The Fall of Chronopolis is essentially pure pulp. This is not particularly high-minded or ideas-driven science fiction, but a finely tuned entertainment which draws on Bayley's substantial skills. The book has a number of narrative threads. The most important focuses on Mond Aton, a senior officer in the Chronotic Empire's Third Time Fleet. He commands a ship, the colourfully named Smasher of Enemies, which takes part in an operation against the Empire's principal external rival, known as the Hegemony. This regime is situated further into the future than the Empire, and possesses time ships of its own, not to mention a new weapon that can erase entire cities from the time stream. During a pivotal battle, Aton encounters aboard his ship elements of the Empire's internal foe, a malevolent cult which threatens to rot society from the inside. Soon, Aton finds himself being falsely accused of cowardice and treason. His punishment is to serve as a courier, transmitting a message between the Empire's fleets. This is a suicide mission, because each messenger is implanted with a phrase which triggers their sudden death. The other story strands focus variously on an Caean aristocrat who is obsessed with the missing corpse of his deceased, beloved sister, a young woman hunted by the cult from world to world, and the progression of the war between the Empire and the Hegemony. Inevitably, Aton finds that far from being over, his role in the fate of the Empire, and perhaps of time itself, is just beginning. In its early chapters, The Fall of Chronopolis can be a bit confusing. This is mainly because while the story ticks many of the boxes expected of space opera, it actually doesn't really fit within that genre. The travels and battles of the fleet don't take place in space, but rather in time, what Bayley calls the temporal substratum, or strat for short. In this setting, time has peculiar properties. It's organised around a series of 7 nodes. These are relatively stable, including the one in which the grand city of Chronopolis itself is based. Between the nodes, though, the chaos of the strat holds sway. Years later, Bayley would become involved with Games Workshop and wrote a number of stories in the setting of Warhammer 40,000. These included a novel, Eye of Terror, from 1999. It's known that 40k takes influence from a number of prominent British SF and fantasy stories, not least those written by Bayley's friend and collaborator Michael Moorcock. The Strat in the Fall of Chronopolis could well have been an influence on the Immaterium or the Warp in 40k. Both are otherworldly means of travel with the potential to drive unprotected travellers insane. Similarly, in the novel there's a sort of revered Gothic machine called the Imperator, which ostensibly contains the collective intelligence of previous rulers of the Chronotic Empire. Neither fully alive nor truly dead, this concept seems to anticipate another element of 40k lore, the Emperor of Mankind. The Emperor was also likely inspired by King Emperor Huon, the principal villain in Moorcock's Hawkmoon series that began with The Jewel in the Skull in 1967. The Fall of Chronopolis is not as strong a novel as The Garments of Caean, but it does have a strong appeal of its own. Its bravura weirdness and the way in which Bayley gradually pulls together its various plot threads are both impressive. Writing in the Science Fiction Encyclopedia, John Clute described the book as Bayley's most impressive use of the time travel theme. Rhys Hughes went as far as to call it, quote, possibly the ultimate time travel story. While on its face this seems an extreme statement, it does reflect the massive scale of the implications in Bayley's shattering climax. Thanks for listening to this episode. You can find more of my writing in text and audio form at my site andyjohnson.xyz. You can also find me on Twitter at andyjohnsonuk, and you can support me at patreon.com/andyjohnson. Catch you next time.